Hey everybody, my name is Rydo, and in a moment we will be starting BioShock. First of all, I just want to show the options we're going to play as, and then before we start the game. 1080p, filter 16 times, window mode off, vertical sync on. I'm still always iffy about vertical sync, but I was specifically told in this one you should have it on. I think in general you would want it on if you're just playing the game, but I'm not sure about when you're recording video, whether you want to limit the number of potential frames that are rendered to whatever monitor you're hooked up to. You may want to render more frames because the recording may catch that. Maybe, maybe not. Probably not. There are very little customized controls here. In fact, as when you look at the controls with the new Xbox One controller, which I'm playing with the 360 controller, it's effectively the same thing. You can't change anything as far as the buttons, and that's where this game starts to show its first little glimpse of how old it is. It's almost 10 years old at this point, and pressing Y to jump and then reloading with the X and B for first aid, and then firing weapons with the left trigger and plasmids with the right trigger, and then switching weapons with the right bump and switching plasmids with the left bump. That's a very odd choice here, and it encourages people to play with their pointer fingers and their middle fingers on the triggers. And I have never been able to play a game that way. Vibration on, auto aim on. I'm going to play this on easy, so that's no big deal. But that's kind of how the game was originally. There may have been some audio things that are missing. See, we need to cover... There was this article saying that the PC version of this was buggy and crashed, but then when I read the article, it's like complaining about going above 1080p resolutions and having to go into the INI files to turn on 5.1 sound. And yes, it sucks that those options aren't there, particularly if they are there in the original game, but it's hardly valid to say the game is crashy. For me, I've already played for a little bit just to make sure. Now, it may be crashing for some other people, certainly. Almost certainly it is. Almost every game crashes. But it felt very much like they just wrote this article to get views to say it was buggy, even when it really wasn't. So I'm going to have the dialogue subtitles on, but you kind of don't want the art subtitles on, because then whenever you hover over a piece of art in the game, 3D modeled art, it gives you a subtitle of what they would call it. It's kind of a silly option in the first place. And then gameplay options, adaptive training, I'm leaving on. We were already there. There's several new things here. Director's commentary we have to unlock, a museum, and trials. 3 new things for the remastered version. And on top of that, the remastered version has a lot of just mostly plants and flora and fauna added in the water sections. A lot of things have been re-rendered, so the 3D models are different. But so it's kind of like if they made a 10-year-old game today and they kept the same basic code but then put new 3D models in it. It looks good, so pretty good for its age, but it's still showing its age because there's just a lack of resolution in the modeling. When you look at the BioShock symbol here, it's a rather smooth, straight rectangle on that eye, where by today's standards there would be little dings and dents on it, more like the O. You see all that texture there? And that's a good example there. Not the O right next to the I, the O next to the H. In fact, you could compare the two O's. The one on the left is a very smooth, simplistic texture. The one on the right is more dinged and beat up. And it's those little flecks of dirt, those little bits that start to make things look more realistic. So that's all we really need to cover now. We're gonna play this game and hopefully no trouble. So let's start the game now. Uh, this game, let's see, brightness is an interesting thing because this is a pretty dark game. I could turn it up, but actually I'm just gonna kind of leave it as default, even though by my monitor it should be down to this point. I'm just gonna leave it at the default, and it shouldn't be a real problem because you're never really gonna see a slightly black screen. The brightness in games is always weird for YouTube because YouTube has a tendency, particularly on the Xbox streaming app, to make things darker. If you're watching it on any streaming app, they're trying to put it within a more limited range of colors, so darks aren't as dark as they can be for PCs. That's what HDR is trying to be once that is finished as a standard. Now I'll go silent so we can see the intro.
They told me, son, you're special. You were born to do great things. You know what? They were right.
So, on top of the water, you have a really nice water effect going on here. This is a very impressive starting scene. But when you were under the water, you were kind of not seeing anything. Let's see. I don't know what OLO could be. Something air. And we're just swimming. We see this light tower. We're swimming around this fire. You get hurt if you get too close to the fire, but you actually can't die. We have one of my most disliked effects of water being on the screen, as if you were watching the game with a piece of glass in front of you. I guess I don't wear glasses, so that would kind of make more sense. That for people, I guess, if they're see, it's A with a arrow, so we can't get any closer as this thing is slowly sinking. I'm bumping into things, which is nice. Now, if you decide to swim out here, there is quite a far amount you can go that way, and it will let you, but it's rather dark. And once you get away from the lighting effects of the fire, which that's the trick of this area, is this is actually an incredibly small area to show off a very good lighting effect scene that you can't really pull off, or you couldn't at the time pull off. You can swim back here. When you start to get a little bit closer to this, you'll notice the sky over here is completely black, and this feels just like a painted on moon. Just a sky. It's not a sky box as much as it is a single section painted. Very artistic attempt here for this little kind of tutorial area in which you do nothing. Now, there's a couple of issues here, now that we're out of the water, that we have to cover. One is I can't possibly really play this game without referencing our BioShock 2 and BioShock Infinite. I probably can't even be too much of a non-spoilerish person. So if you've never played the games, I'd highly recommend you get the BioShock collection now on PC or your gaming console of choice, or and play all three of them. So come back in probably 60 hours plus time after you've played all the games and know all the spoilers. Because when we look here, we see all these little reflections here. And I think that might be a hint. Now, I don't know if this was in the original game or not, but this certainly seems like a hint to the ending of BioShock Infinite. And that each one of these speckles might be a lighthouse of their own. But I don't know. Maybe the grid-like pattern that I see here is also just a factor of how the waves have been programmed to move, and every time the waves peak, they're peaking in a very specific way. This series, if everything goes right, will be the beginning of my Halloween month of October, and I think in a country there is a place for people like me. In what country is there a place for people like me? Andrew Rydo. No gods or kings, only man. So, we are going to cover this game because it includes some of the scariest things of all, and that is the philosophy of objectivism, libertarianism, Ayn Rand, and her book Atlas Shrugged. And we'll cover more of all of that to my understanding of it, and I am almost certain people are going to argue with this. I would love for this series to be my magnum opus to explain why there are major problems with all of those things, but me just saying that is probably going to have people put comments on the video without watching the rest of the series, explaining how there are no problems with any of those things and they're perfect and they're the greatest ideals ever. And frankly, if you're trying to make that argument for this game, it's a flawed argument. Even the game, at least from how I perceive it, says that the ideals that Ayn Rand, the Ayn Rand facsimile Andrew Ryan don't work. If they worked, we would be landing up in a paradise city, not the city we're about to see.
I am Andrew Ryan, and I'm here to ask you a question. Is a man not entitled to the sweat of his brow? No, says the man in Washington, it belongs to the poor. No, says the man in the Vatican, it belongs to God. No, says the man in Moscow, it belongs to everyone. I rejected those answers. Instead, I chose something different. I chose the impossible. I chose rapture.
And there's a good point I will point out later about the name Rapture.
Would not fear censor, where the scientist would not be bound by petty morality, where the great would not be constrained by the small. And with the sweat of your brow, rapture can become your city as well.
So take note of the jellyfish, take note of the plants. None of that was in the original game. All these in-game cutscenes are including a lot more flora, fauna, things that just more video RAM could do 10 years on that we couldn't have done back then. The city is designed, it's called Art Deco or Art Nouveau. I don't remember which one, maybe both. See, then in the first sentence that Andrew Ryan says, he says the scientist is not bound by morals. And I've never heard a scientist say, man, if it weren't for all the morals that other people had stopping me, I would go create Frankenstein's monster. No, kind of the opposite. Most scientists have their own morals that bound them, and they wouldn't want to do things that were unethical. So I can move my camera at any point, but why would I want to right now?
Is it someone new?
Notice how they're kind of framing this first cutscene so they make sure you're looking. So this thing we're in is called a bathysphere, and it's getting wrecked. Subtitles are spoiling some stuff. They will do that.
Would you kindly pick up that shortwave radio?
So, here we're gonna have this guy help
I don't
us.
know how you survived that plane crash, but I've never been one to question Providence. I'm Atlas, and I aim to keep you alive. Now keep on moving. We're gonna have to get you to higher ground.
Now, about 10 years ago,
Step out of the bathysphere. I won't leave you twisting in the wind.
notice that the door, the shutters came down on the windows over there. About 10 years ago, Atlas Shrugged, Ayn Rand, not particularly as
We're gonna need to draw
popular.
out of hiding, but you're gonna have to trust me.
So this guy being called Atlas and Andrew Ryan being called Andrew Ryan for Ayn Rand. It's kind of weird though that they didn't just call her straight up Ayn Rand or and have it be a female protagonist in the world. That's something I think in today's day and date you could certainly get away with. Again, we have physics, so I can jump and knock things in the water. Of course, to jump you have to hit Y, which is kind of strange. This was one of the tests I saw someone else do, is bump into the thing and see if they would go crazy, and they don't feel like they really are going to insane. They seem like they're just actual objects that you would bump into in the real world. But it's really important to realize, even from the beginning, this is what happened with Andrew Ryan in
Just a
charge.
bit further. How do you like that, sister? Now, would you kindly find a crowbar or something? Bloody
There-
splicer, seal Johnny in before they... Goddamn splicers.
There's a lot of stuff in this game that has to get introduced. And this is kind of the spiritual successor to System Shock, which is interesting because System Shock just succeeded in getting a Kickstarter for a remake, and I'm very interested in seeing where the remake goes with that. That's interesting. So somebody's throwing a flaming couch at me.
Report me, you
And this guy attacks me and I have to hit him with a wrench. And then we can search him and take a Eve, hypo, and the first aid kit.
Are you as good as my daddy, mister? Not if you don't visit the gatherer's garden.
So there's a lot of stuff here that should be breakable and isn't. Now, you eat pep bars by picking them up, and I would recommend not eating them if you're at full health. You can kind of see the age in the game that when you hit something, it's doing the same circular pattern everywhere. If it even does that, some things kind of bounce when you hit them, some things don't. Not a very good shattering of what you would assume is glass. Very small particles, well, no, very large particles. All the water sections, of course, makes a better sound effect, but doesn't crack or anything. Of course, you would kind of ruin your experience if you could drown yourself by accidentally shooting or hitting glass and breaking it and flooding the area. Rapture, November 5th, 1946. One man's vision, mankind's salvation. So, to get on this, Atlas Shrugged is this book where circumstances are written in such a way that the hero of the story, which I'll use that in quotation marks, is put in a position where they should and do take all the smart scientists and good businessmen and everybody who could potentially add anything to society and help society in general. He just takes them all and hides them in a secret location far away from the US government, which, by the way, in the intro they said that the US government's policy is that the sweat of your brow goes to the poor. I think in 2016 most people would clearly disagree with that. If anything, the United States is an oligarchy and the sweat of your brow slowly trickles up to the rich, if anything. So even the argument is wrong. In a lot of ways, that is kind of the problem with Ayn Rand in general. Her way of thinking, the philosophy of objectivism itself, is that you can find the truth because you're connected to reality and you'll just know it. And it's just completely rejected by philosophers. All schools of philosophy. Any real professor says it's garbage. But it did encourage the economic way of thinking of libertarianism, which basically, in a nutshell, as I understand it, is no, we're not playing the game right now. This is a lot to explain, and this is about the most quiet point where we can explain this, and so we don't have to talk about it for the rest of the series as much. Libertarianism, as I understand, is basically they want the government to do as little as possible, basically nothing, except for enforce contracts. There would be no police, there would be no social security, there would be no post office. If you wanted to send a mail, you would have to sign a contract for somebody to deliver the mail. If you wanted protection, you would have to hire private police. It ultimately turns what is already an oligarchy in the United States, and that's pretty much the only place where libertarianism has any foothold at all, into a complete oligarchy where only rich people who could sue people who didn't follow contracts, only people who could have lawyers and to make confusing contracts, which who reads those terms of services? Imagine if you were signing 100 of those every day. Here's the thing that should break and absolutely doesn't. It's a shame.
Are you as good as my daddy, mister? Not if you don't visit the gatherer's garden, you are.
The audio there, of course, is dragging me towards that. I can't activate the store control until I do. Like, here's a pneumatic mail tube. Like, this actually wouldn't even be in there. There would be like a insert money here in the coin slot to mail something. Well, and even in that case, it still wouldn't exist, because the whole point is nothing should be done by the government, and Andrew Ryan as effectively is the government of Rapture, so he does do a lot. He creates the security system, he creates all the buildings through public works projects. I mean, he's not even really following libertarianism as much as you might think, because at a certain point he becomes the government, and their argument is government is bad and shouldn't do anything for the people, just leave them alone. Which I kind of get the mentality, just leave me alone, government, but it doesn't work. It doesn't work in a small scale. It doesn't work in a big scale. Here, these aren't breakable either. Let's go ahead and pick this up. So that's pretty much just a rough introduction of my understanding of all that and where this is coming from. Now, it's important to realize that Ayn Rand,
Your genetic code is being
we'll
rewritten.
get back into it in a
Hold
second.
on and everything will be fine.
As we're getting introduced to another gameplay mechanic. It's been not very long. Here the subtitle is spoiling what's going to be said several seconds early.
This little fish looks like he just had his cherry popped. Wonder if he's still got some Adam on him. Let's buck. Weak! You're a weak chopper. This little fish ain't worth towing it with no big daddy. Yellow! Always have been. You'll be no better off with Metal Daddy, little fish. See you floating from my...
I wish that cutscene didn't have black bars on the top and bottom. That was a cheat for weaker video cards. Now it would look a lot better without that and be full screen.
Look, Mr. Bubbles, it's an angel. I can see light coming from his belly. Wait a minute, he's still breathing. It's all right. I know he'll be an angel soon.
So you really don't touch upon what the little sisters, that girl, actually see and how they see things, and how they define their reality until the second game. But that's kind of a hint towards it. So she said you were an angel because she just assumed you were dead, and then she saw that you were breathing, and she changed your reality and said, "Oh, no, he's not an angel." Sadly, we can't get any more of these, which I don't think they would matter anyways, because they'd just give you the same electro bolt plasmid ability. So, to get back to it, the reason why Ayn Rand wrote her book is because she grew up in communist Russia, hugely corrupt country. We would have been a hugely corrupt country if it was a capitalist system. It would have been a hugely corrupt country if it was a socialist system. It doesn't really matter what economic system they had, because in the end, it was still a fascist dictatorship. So that's the real issue. You can see we're not coming back this way. So she wrote several books, The Fountainhead and Atlas Shrugged, writing how communism is horrible. Guess we're not going this way. That made... Look, we got some fish floating there. Can't eat fish or anything. We're coming here. So she wrote kind of how communism was bad, and how capitalism is so good that it should pretty much be religiously worshipped, and free market ideas and such. And it has been religiously worshipped by some people to a crazy extent. And that is where people come in. Let's see. Health is gained, but Eve is lost when you drink alcohol. Plus you get drunk. So we'll not want to do that. Here's a dead cat. These are Vita chambers where you will, let's see, what's this? What's that button next to it? Is that the back button? Yep. It's a different button on the Xbox One controller. So there's all kinds of notes and stuff in the menu. Basically, if we die in the game, which we may not.
Splicer! Give him the combo. Zap him, then whack him. 1-2 punch. Remember, the 1-2 punch!
I didn't touch her!
Where's the guy?
None of these other chumps.
There we go. So the 1-2 punch. Now I'm at 5 syringes of Eve right now, so when I pick up this next one, I'm going to get up to 6. Oh, I think it's 10. Oh, yeah. So here's people protesting that. Yeah, so she just had a very skewed perspective. Health gained from eating food, so you can eat food if you want to. You might want to leave it though, if you're at full health for later. There you can listen to them making noise.
I just wanted some pop.
Go up here and hit him. So we're filling up our amount. That place is flooded now. We're filling up on our health and Eve things, and we're going to keep that at 10 the whole throughout the game. And so I think I've thoroughly explained her perspective, and she's seriously just overreacted to the point of insanity, and introduced an idea, and then people considered it, and then people quit considering it, and they thought it through and realized it wouldn't work, and it didn't make sense. And now some people are still considering and still thinking it makes sense, but you have to do so many mental gymnastics to start thinking about it. A country without police, a country without any assistance for the weak and elderly. You might as well just embrace anarchy at that point. You might as well say that it should be Mad Max with people running around with guns, stealing gasoline in the desert. Alright. So here we have an elevator system that's going to take us, I believe, to our first little area. And so I think I've covered that whole topic, and that's our introductory thing. How much of that really applies?
I've got a family. I need to get them out of here. But the splicers have cut me off from them. If you can reach them in Neptune's bounty, then maybe, just maybe. I know you must feel like the unluckiest man in the world right now. But you're the only hope I'll ever see my wife and child again. Go to Neptune's bounty. Find my family, please.
So our goal now is to go to Neptune's bounty. We have this indicator at the top telling us where to go. The great chain is guided by our hand. What does that even mean? How much of that really even matters or is connected to this game? It's kind of just a facade.
Why are you here?
Here's
Why is it today and not
a
when you
funeral place.
Why can't mommy hold you?
And see, we can. It's a weird game because this is you're hearing the bad guys actually talk and be emotional and you're sympathetic to them. So you just kind of want to approach this, and you'd think maybe I could put the weapon away and then she wouldn't be afraid, but I don't think there's actually a button to put the weapon away. So what is she looking at?
Baby and me! Baby and me!
These people are totally crazy. Now,
Plasma's changed everything. They destroyed our bodies, our minds. We couldn't handle it. Best friends butchering one another. Babies strangled in cribs. The whole city went to hell.
So now we have weapons. So I can hit the right bump and switch, or I can hold on to the right bump and get a choice selector. Again, bullets, health, Eve, all things that will be rather limited, so it's not the greatest move to use your gun immediately. So yeah, people started using effectively a drug. There's no way a way to say it. And it gave them magical powers, which is cool, but also drove them insane. And frankly, the powers it gave people don't make the most amount of sense. They're all these offensive weapon abilities that could be used in an inoffensive way, but seem mostly designed around this video game than something that people would actually have. I really don't see in my day-to-day life, I don't need an ability to I believe there was an achievement for hitting all these party hats in the original game. Of course, if there is, in the remastered version, that may not be the same thing. So this was the Rapture Masquerade Ball in 1959. So it went about 12 years to get this far, which is quite impressive. That you could build anything at the bottom of the sea. It's beyond what we could actually do even now. What happens when we use the phone? Nothing.
Flash time.
Pick up $1. Cannot carry any more health packs. That's where we want to be. There's a little sister popping up there. That might be new to the remastered version. Achievements for Steam are new. Now this is weird.
I do spiced up.
Open up.
Nobody's gonna want me.
So here's your pay toilets. Which I saw an interesting article about how it's illegal in the United States to create pay toilets, or at least it was for a long time, and people have found ways around it. Interesting, which way does the toilet swirl in a city under the sea? Probably the same way it always would. Here we can drink some toilet whiskey. And so you get these ghosts for no real explanation, and then you get this. And then we're gonna listen to these.
Hey Brenda, you care to tell me why you've had a hole in the wall the size of Plymouth Rock coming out of your crapper going on 3 weeks now? Nah, I ain't saying I'm Shakespeare. I'm trying to run a respectable theater. I got working folk coming in from Port Neptune trying to catch a little diversion. And all they can think about is the stink coming out of your shitter. Get it fixed.
So you really don't need the 1-2 punch right now, particularly on easies, I guess. I suppose if I was playing this on hard, which I'm sure there's an achievement for beating this game on hard without using a vital chamber, because that was in the 360 version too, that's pretty demanding. Let's see. So I wouldn't recommend
Careful
doing
now.
that.
Would you kindly lower that weapon for a minute?
Yo, open up.
And the door locked behind me, so I have to do this.
Flash time. I warned ya.
So it's kind of a weird thing. You have to look down here to see what the story is trying to say.
You think that's a child down there? Don't be fooled.
There's a lot of stuff in
She's a
there.
little sister now. Somebody went and turned a sweet baby girl into a monster. Whatever you thought about right and wrong on the surface, well, that don't count for much down in Rapture. Those little sisters, they carry Adam, the genetic material that keeps the wheels of Rapture turning. Everybody wants it, everybody needs it.
So there is a economic system of money, but there's also Adam is way more important.
Open up!
Rapture, by the way, means when you're taken away. It's mostly biblically used.
Flash time.
It's when all the people that are good Christians are taken up to heaven before the end times. And so there is a sick logic kind of to it that Andrew Ryan raptured all these scientists and smart people to this new area, and then without any regulations or morals, apparently they decided to make Little Sisters and Adam and plasmids. In fact, pretty much there's not much in this world that I would say was made in a useful fashion. So this guy's sneaking up on her, trying to hurt her. And he hits her with a gun. It may be the only video game where you pistol whip, see a little girl get pistol whipped. And that brings the Big Daddy.
That's the Big Daddy. She got it on him. He keeps her safe.
So you don't want to mess with that guy if you're not ready. He has another revolver, but because I already have a revolver, I will simply take his bullets. Here we have a broken vending machine. Often around broken vending machines we'll find maybe a piece of something to eat. But nope. So I missed a section. I think I can get back into that area later, but I missed something in the in that, what is it? That restaurant. Right. So we can go in here and we see these little red lights. They look like they might have been Adam. We can search this corpse for more money. We will want money to upgrade our weapons. Here's the director's commentary, so let's start with that. You've unlocked an episode of the director's commentary. Play it now or view it from the main menu. Spoiler warning, the commentary contains in-depth discussion of the plot details, including the ending. First-time players should wish to complete the game before being... Frankly, I just don't have time to go through this game twice. And I've already said if you wanted to not get spoilers, you needed to play the whole game. So let's just do the commentary now.
Hey, I'm Jeff Keighley here in Boston.
Boy, it is
to
just
go
a video.
behind the scenes to hear some untold stories.
Not very good
about the
frame rate
making
on
of
the video.
BioShock with Ken Levine and Shawn Robertson.
How long is this going to be? It's going to be ironic here as they talk about some of the stuff I've already talked about over again. But we definitely don't need an intro in the game. Obviously, this was probably put out.
Let's talk a bit
as
about
some
the theme and setting
advertising.
of BioShock Rapture. I think a lot of people, when they played the game for the first time, they wondered, how did you even dream up this place? And I know you said publicly before that part of the reason you what led you to Rapture was this idea of fully simulating a place. Tell us about that sort of idea and the frustrations you had with other games where you sort of hit a bound.
I think our philosophy was always to do what we were doing 100% rather than try to do something bigger and do it 50% or 40%. So one of the ideas of, and this sort of came from System Shock 2 as well, where you focus on an area that you can really bring to life and you kind of eliminate the questions of, well, why can't I go over the bridge to New Jersey? So we were able to really make a place, I think, that felt believable and real, even though in actuality it was really quite limited. But we just sort of dressed it with all these buildings outside that were all, that were all basically glorified fakes. We let the story drive what we needed to show rather than some kind of like predetermined map which we set down, which is a little different than like System Shock 2, where we actually mapped a spaceship out deck by deck.
Yeah.
Because I don't know what the philosophy felt a little different there, because you want to feel like a real spaceship that was sort of stacked on top of each other. Rapture was free to sprawl across the ocean floor.
Although you guys originally, Shawn, were talking about doing this game on a sort of spaceship again, right?
Yeah, when we first started talking about what the spiritual successor to System Shock 2 was going to be, Spaceship came up, but again, we wanted a limited environment, and we didn't necessarily want to do Spaceship again. And our first actual exploration of this space was underwater, but ultimately ended up looking like a spaceship. It just happened to have a couple of seaweed fronds outside. And that started to push us towards what artistic statement that we wanted to make this look different, and what rules we were going to set for the world. How at every turn we were going to try to remind the player that they were in fact underwater and that this wasn't a spaceship.
And how, like, underwater, we obviously know you did underwater, then sitting in the sky, like, where did you come with the idea of, like, doing this underwater?
I think there was probably a conversation. It's like, well, what kind of places could be cut off from other places?
Yeah.
Like, well, spaceship, summer camp, any island notion, right? Something that's cut off from the rest of the world.
Yeah.
So you never felt like you should be able to go over that bridge to New Jersey.
I don't want to apply some deep and meaningful conversation.
He's kind of right about that. A lot of games do get set up into Manhattan.
That sounds cool. Let's try
and
that.
you never get out of Manhattan to New Jersey.
I think it lended itself to having very nice views out the window without having to build an insane amount of unique assets.
Right.
By today's standards, we still were a small team back then, and there's an expectation that because you're underwater, the view distances are going to be short, so you can really kind of fade out into the fog at a short distance and not have the expectation that, why can't I see forever? So there's a lot of limitations in a good way that we put on ourselves by being underwater, as opposed to, like, if you're on a cruise ship, then you'd expect to see across the water, and we'd have to deal with that. Same thing with an island.
Or in a city in the sky.
Yeah, exactly.
Which was a lot more complicated, yeah.
So you came up with the idea of, let's do this underwater, let's do this sort of isolated place. Then you had to answer the question of, why would someone build this? Is that sort of how it worked, sort of order of operations? You then had to come up with a story to explain?
Yeah, I think we wanted a very believable reason why they'd be there. Right. And sort of the necessary isolation of the place sort of led to, well, what kind of person would want to do this? And I wasn't even particularly aware of the sort of political implications of what I was reading, but I've been reading, I had read The Fountainhead by Ayn Rand, and I mostly thought it was an interesting story. Like, I didn't realize that people were sort of basing their sort of political lives around it, because I wasn't that tuned in to that stuff at that point. And so, but I love the dialogue and the kind of speechifying in it, because you can see a video game character speaking with that kind of certainty and that kind of confident philosophy. It just seemed like a natural kind of thing to apply to this place. And so it just sort of all came together as a sort of who is the guy who would do this? Well, that character. It was sort of this amalgamation of characters from Ayn Rand's books and Ayn Rand herself. This sort of idealistic person who says, well, the only way to do this is to separate from the rest of the world. And that led to Andrew Ryan.
I am Andrew Ryan, and I'm here to ask you a question. Is a man not entitled to the sweat
See, and
of
I think
his
it's
brow?
just interesting now,
No,
10 years later,
says the man in
how
Washington,
much
it belongs
trouble
to
he
the
would
poor.
have been in
No, says
had
the
he
man in the
turned
Vatican,
basically
it
Ayn Rand
belongs to
into a
God.
man
No, says
for
the
no
man in
real reason.
Moscow. It belongs to everyone.
The people would be crying
We
sexism
knew,
left and right, but back
from a
then,
technical
it
standpoint,
never
that
even
we
came
wanted
up. Nobody even
isolation.
thought of it.
We also knew to sell it, we needed a compelling story.
Even in BioShock
backstory that
Infinite,
why would this
you're
place
still
exist?
kind of-
Otherwise, how are we going to make
The main
Rapture
bad
feel
guy
like it's
is a
worth it if
guy,
we don't have
but there
the
is a
reason for
main
it to
bad
be there.
girl in Infinite
So
too.
once we decided on the underwater location and then the closed-off spaces, that objectivist story kind of came in and made the art stronger and made the level design stronger, because we could feed back into that loop.
And I think that's why we had to have sort of Andrew Ryan's pitch right at the beginning of the game. We wanted people to understand why somebody would go there. And so he makes this very personal one-to-one pitch to the gamer, but also that was the pitch he'd make to people, which was, there's a place that you can be free of all these things, where you could not be sort of put upon by the government and not be afraid of nuclear war and not be afraid of all these other things that will plague you on the surface. We wanted that pitch to sort of resonate and make sense, because that's, otherwise by the time you got there you'd be like, well, this place is just fantasy, nobody would ever come here. And that the beauty of the place also was also tied into that. It had to be a very attractive proposition, or people who would believe that people would go leave their lives and go to the bottom of the ocean.
I'm sure in some ways you had to convince the team and enroll them in your sort of vision of who this character was going to be and what the setting was going to be. How did that work, Shawn?
I wonder how
Ken
long
come
this
in and
is.
say, hey, I've been reading these books, and I think
There's about
sort of
10 of
I believe he
these.
just came in one day on a horse and said, and ran, everybody read the Fountainhead.
Exactly. I bought 30 copies of
Yeah, I think,
Here's a 2,000-page book or something.
Yeah.
Go read it.
I mean, really, it was more organic. Like I said, we knew that we had this location, and you struggle to fill it with stories, and you struggle to find meaning of why does this place exist? What's my motivation? And as Ken started to explore Ayn Rand a little more and started talking to us about it, and we were having that conversation, and it's like, oh, this could totally work. Like, this is exciting. Like, this is something that really hasn't been done in a video game before. And if we had flipped it and come up with the idea first before the location, I don't think we would have really been that excited about it. But we had a location, and now we're trying to fill it with that story. And because of the order of operation there, you start to get excited, like, oh, I could totally make this work. This is going to really make it feel like a lived-in space.
As you think of sort of the the setting, and you think of maybe a character or something, was there a moment?
This is incredibly weird to be sitting here and not playing the game for this long.
For me, it was going.
Particularly considering this game has audio logs that you can run around and play as you're listening to. It seems like a huge dropping of the ball to just go to this video when all this audio could just be playing.
It's this block in New York,
cut up
or a couple
into
blocks
more
in New York,
new
where Radio
developer
City Music
commentary
Hall
audio
is,
logs.
and where 30 Rockefeller Plaza is, where you see that show 30 Rock, and the ice skating rink, and where they put the Christmas tree, and it's this very iconic location. But what's cool about it, it's all one, unlike the rest of the city. Everywhere you look, it's one architectural style. It's Art Deco, and it's very iconic Art Deco. And my wife and I were there, and we were sort of working on the game, and we didn't have a visual style. And all of a sudden, I started looking around, and I said, oh, this could be a visual for the game. Also, the geometry of it was actually quite conducive to making a video game, because it wasn't overly complicated geometry. Art Deco is quite
bold and simple.
Bold and geometric, and simple.
Yep.
And so my wife and I bought a couple of tourist cameras before.
Bad by
before
today's
iPhone
standards.
cameras,
Throwaway cameras,
yeah, throwaway cameras with little Kodak things, and we just started photographing doorknobs and light fixtures, and just sort of developed the photos.
The graphics in the remastered version, in particular,
said,
barely still playable.
Photos.
Really,
I'll see you guys in a couple
if it was
years.
a couple years older, I would say it's probably going to be very difficult to play through it.
Where the scientists would not be bound by petty morality, where the great
So,
would not be constrained by
this
the
is still
small.
the remastered intro, though. You can tell by the jellyfish. Like, those blue jellyfish were completely missing in the original game. All the green plants were missing.
So you had kind of a theme, you came up with an art style, some of the iconic characters, and then you really had to build the narrative around it. And you've talked about a lot of the themes in the game, and greed, jealousy, sex, violence, all the things that sort of drive us or what destroy us. And that was something I think that as you thought about the story of the game, you wanted to, I'm sure, reflect some of those, right? Because I think people love the characters. It's sort of flawed in a way, and this is a world which is its own little microcosm, but had a lot of tension inside of it.
Yeah, I mean, the character of Ryan was sort of, he's basically invisible through most of the game, right? Except for a very small portion. But he's very present because the city is him, right? It's such a representation of him. We never want to cut away to a cutscene where you saw Andrew Ryan, planning and scheming. We wanted him to be very present without actually being present. But once you had Ryan, once you had his desire to protect this vision of his, you just had to then come up with the characters who'd be arrayed in opposition to him. So we had this character, the Big Daddy, and then eventually the character, the Little Sister. And so characters like Tenenbaum came along, like, here's a person who's in opposition to him for this reason. And then you have, for more noble reasons. And then you have a character like Atlas, who's much more cynical opposition. Once we had all those characters arrayed, we're like, well, who are you? And, you ended up being a sort of, a pawn in the middle of all this opposition to Ryan. We just kept kind of homing in on that theme and making sure that you weren't, eventually figuring out that you couldn't just be here by an accident, that you're an integral part of this story, even though you don't know you're an integral part of this story. You think you're just there by happenstance.
Look, Mr. Bubbles, it's an angel.
See, notice how this cutscene is
I can
zoomed in to make it full screen.
Wait a minute, he's still breathing.
They didn't ever render this cutscene.
I know he'll be an angel soon.
Zoomed out so you could actually see the face of the character or anything like that. And I suppose that was intentional. Man, that was long though. That is incredibly long. So it makes no sense that they wouldn't break that into 5 different questions and 5 different collectibles that you would pick up as audio logs and listen while you can run around and play the game. Because now that they've taken maybe 15 minutes out of the gameplay just sitting here watching this video, which is really, really strange. And because of that, we can run forward a little bit, but that's about it. And I can't get back up here. So if I believe several hours from now you get the opportunity to get back into that section, and that's it. So that's really where this is a horror game, is from its... It becomes more important to start hitting these guys with the lightning when they're shooting at you, because otherwise you're going to get shot before you can get close enough. I will eventually run into the problem of having the maximum number of bullets, but that's not a big deal right now. You can search things when they're empty. That's kind of a waste of time for the player. And go into it. So it's like they like to jump towards you and attack. So it's kind of dangerous also to do that. Come bite the apple at Eve's garden. And sometimes we'll see little sisters in there.
Spot a splicer in the water. Hit him with the electrobolt.
I do believe we are. Yeah, but don't go in it myself until the water is gone. That's good to learn. So this, as a concept, is actually let's see, how can I use Eve now to fill? See, if I want to pick up this Eve hypo, I think I can't actually do it without shooting the bolt somewhere and using it all up, because there's no reload button actually in the controls. If we go look, there is actually no reload button for Eve. Oh, well, I guess there is. It's just the X button. So when you have a plasmid up, your reload is to use Eve. When you have a gun up, your reload is to use some other things. So there's this medical pavilion. We're going to have to wander around. There's this area here. We're going to have to see this bathroom. We're going to wander around. We're going to go about an hour long. Grab the bandages that heals you in each recording, and we'll hopefully have enough footage to cover all of the month of October. Even though this is probably going to come out a few days before then. The bathroom wall has been taken down, although actually it hasn't been taken down, has it? The bathroom is just connected. That's a weird design. Why would you have a connected bathroom and then divide it? I mean, doesn't it say here gents, and over here does it not say? Oh, it's just a double gents. Okay, that's weird. Notice there's, compared to BioShock Infinite, there's no like change there. So I just got punished for hitting A too fast and picking up a bunch of alcohol. That is something I will probably do a lot of. So I can't get back up here too. This game is actually incredibly linear. And let's just see, can we save the game? Yes, we can go ahead and make hard saves whenever we feel like it. Interesting, there's a save screen. That goes to show how old this game is. And let's just hop back to the menu for this one time, because I do want to just point out a few things. So the director's commentary, we could watch this one again. There's about 10, if I don't bother to actually count more of those in there. It's quite a lot. Then there's this museum we'll play after we play the game, and then there's this additional content, which are these challenge rooms that we'll do later. So there's a lot of extra game here, but nothing really else. So we'll load back in here. That way we don't have a loading screen edit. So that's going to be it for this first intro. I know for a fact that this has been probably a difficult to watch episode. Notice it has the director's commentary is labeled at the bottom there for this area. I think that's what that means. So that icon will probably change once we get the director's commentary in this area. But like I said, I know this has been a difficult one. We had a lot to cover with just understanding the background of it. Now we don't have to talk about that. We had a lot to cover with the setup. We've been playing for an hour here. I have seen 0 visual glitches. I have seen no stuttering. I've seen no anything. Now, admittedly, when I launched this game once, it didn't show me any video. But then I just alt-tabbed out, alt-tabbed back in, and it worked. So that's not a huge unplayable mess. This is so far so good. Well, of course, they may have very well done all the bug checking at the beginning of the game, and by the time we're at the end, we'll have all the trouble. That's often the case when they do quality assurance for games. But we'll have to just see. That's it for this episode. At the end of all my episodes, I say the same thing. I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment if you want to, and watch every second of my videos, because all that helps me with YouTube, tells them that my videos are worth watching. If you want to support me even further than that, you can click on my name, Rydo. That'll get you to my main YouTube page. On the right, there's a blue button that says support this channel. You can click that and make a donation. Also on my main YouTube page is a playlist tab. You can click there and see a playlist for every game I've ever covered. And I have covered a lot of games, so I'm sure you'll find something that interests you. And then finally, down below in the description box, I have links to all my social media sites like Facebook, Twitter, Tumblr, Google+, Steam, and Battle.net. And please follow and friend me on all of those services. That helps me with those services, and it lets you know when my latest videos are available to view. Thank you for watching. Have a good evening.